Welcome to our next episode of the Around the Ballpark podcast. My name is Mike Redman. I am your host alongside Darren Redman. And today we are talking Minnesota Twins baseball, a team with a rich history. And I'm excited to just get in and start talking about it. This is a team that has been around for quite some time. And we have the honor today on our podcast to have a special guest. His name is Brandon, and he is the host of the Around the Twins podcast. On the Locked On Twins podcast, on the Locked On Baseball Network. And Brandon, thank you for being here. And if you'd like to share a little bit about yourself.
No, I don't know if anybody wants to hear that, but yeah,
I do.
Yeah, no, I'm glad to be here. I'm always enjoying jumping on shows and, just sharing my thoughts on the Twins because I have a lot of them. But I grew up a Twins fan starting in 1993 and had season tickets for a while. Once I moved down here, I grew up north. And then once I started doing media stuff, it was kind of like, all right, well, now I get to go to the games and sit in the press box and do all that. So I've kind of done a little bit of everything at those levels. And now as a podcaster, I kind of get to put on a different hat and do things I haven't done as much. So it's always unique experiences, which I really enjoy. But yeah, baseball and the sport is near and dear to me. And so covering my hometown team has been nothing short of tremendous.
That's awesome. And kind of before we get into everything, I saw on your profile you are still playing. Are you still playing softball today, or you kind of putting that behind you, or what's that look like?
I'm still hanging in there in my late 30s. I played college and baseball, not softball, and then I played what they call town ball in the Twin Cities here, which is basically men's amateur baseball. I played that till I was 29, and now I'm doing old man beer league softball. And every year I tell myself I don't know how many years I have left in my knees and my back, but we're gonna push it till the wheels come off.
I'd say I'm older than you. I miss playing that softball. I miss it. Don't stop. That's all I'm saying. And
Yep.
I'll tell you one thing about different culture, same culture, because hockey is so big in Minnesota. As you know, those old man beer leagues, they go forever, as they should. I mean, you got guys playing in the 60s, so it's great. It's great. So do you play ARC? Do you play modified? What do you play right now?
Honestly, it's just like slow pitch.
No, that's great.
Yeah, it's nothing fancy, but we're in like a C league, not one of the top, but I play in 3 different cities on different days. 2 of them I'm a regular, and then 1 I'm a fill-in. So never a shortage of time to go out and get some exercise.
So we call that around where I used to live in California. Now I'm in Cape Cod. We used to call those, and that's what I was part of. I got work on Monday League. Nice. Let's not go crazy, man.
Yep.
Put it over. Let's go.
Yep.
Yeah, and one of the biggest debates, I don't know if you experienced that, is the pitching screens debate. Like that, just we go back and forth. So many people defend it. Don't want the injuries. We got to go to work on Monday. I'm a proponent for it, and the other half are adamant. Defensive advantage. You can actually get hurt more if it hits a certain spot, and so it's just like war room when you go in the meeting trying to decide yes or no for these things. So we've kind of been on pause for almost 2 years in our church league right now.
Well, so. I don't like playing third base, let alone pitching. I play third, but I do it because of my reflexes, not because I want to get balls ripped at me. But that's about as close as I'm willing to get. I will never play even with the bag. I'm back a little ways, and hopefully the arm holds up. But yeah, pitching, no chance, absolutely none.
No chance. And one more thing before we transition, just because we're talking about softball, some of the softball rules that are kind of sneaking their way into Major League Baseball, in terms of the extra innings and runner at second base and stuff. Just quick 30-second thoughts on some of those things. And do you hate it? Do you love it? Or are you kind of impartial?
As far as MLB or as far as softball?
MLB.
Oh, MLB. Yeah. You know what is funny? I actually went into the idea that I would hate it, and the time, like the speed up of time between pitches and all that. I thought, you know what? I'm going to hate it. I'm going to be so upset. And it actually grew on me. All of those things grew on me way more than I thought. I thought I was this big purist, and turns out I didn't hate him at all. It didn't take me long to win me over. The bigger bases and all that. I don't know. if you hadn't told us a lot of those things were changing, we probably wouldn't have noticed many of them, but the games just felt crisper. And I didn't realize how much I'd enjoy a ball game getting done at 9:30 instead of 10:30.
One thing I could say, I'm still not quite sure. I'm still, but one thing I can say is like you don't want to leave and walk around for too long because the game, be 2 innings will pass you by. So it is really more of an urgency to actually sit in your seat and get there early if you want to check out the entire ballpark. But
or BP, batting practice.
for
watch batting practice and walk around the park a little bit, because otherwise you're gonna run out of time pretty quick.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll jump into it here. I'd like to start with something fun here. So let's do this off the cuff, Darren and Brandon, in terms of if you're going to create your Mount Rushmore pitching rotation. Let's just start there all time. We're just talking from 61 on because Minnesota Twins, etc. So I jotted down my
Twins
4.
only.
Twins only.
Okay.
Yeah. So
no
I'll give you my 4.
No Senators? Okay.
No Senators. My apologies to the Walter Johnson family. 61 or
Those older people.
Walter can be the you can name it the Walter Johnson's monument with the players on it. You can give him the emeritus status.
I like that. Let's do that. So the 4 I jotted down, and I'm a Mets fan, so I may get these wrong, but for me, just from my experience, Bert Blyleven, Jim Cott, Johan Santana, and Frank Viola are my 4.
And my 4, so exact same one I got.
That 4. Okay.
Yeah.
I would go Blyleven, Cott, Santana. If I wanted to change it up, I feel like I'm missing someone that is sneaky good. Like Viola's a great pick. I'll go.
Oh,
yeah, I hate it. I got to do the same thing. I got to. You know what? I'll say. I'll go off the radar with Francisco Liriano because of how good he was at his peak.
all right.
Okay.
Because otherwise, Frank Viola is a great pick. Camilo Pascual. There's a lot of good picks. Mudcat Grant. There's a bunch of guys you could go with.
Who had one of the best nicknames in all baseball history? Mudcat is a great nickname.
Mudcat's a tremendous nickname.
Yes.
I think his real name was Jim. Jim. Everybody can be named Jim. Not many people can be named Mudcat.
Exactly.
Yeah, no. So next I just wanted to I'm going to throw just 2 names out there synonymous with Minnesota Twins history, just off the cuff. Kirby Puckett and Joe Mauer, thoughts on the Hall of Fame induction. I'd like to hear just both your thoughts on those 2 individuals, because when I hear Twins, those are the 2 names that obviously come to mind. So if you can just share what you think.
Well, for me, Joe Mauer is 100% first ballot Hall of Famer, just like it was voted. And it just comes down to me where the catcher position is so hard to compare to any other position. The amount that you control the game, there's a reason why they're the one player on the field looking in the other direction. Everything they do is vitally important. And so we struggle figuring out value for catchers adequately because, one, they don't play as much. They get ground into the finest of sand if they play 140, 130 games. So they obviously have to, step back a little bit, but their careers aren't as long. So guys like Johnny Bench, if you're a big fan of WAR, he's not going to have as high a one as, say, Hank Aaron, or even a good Hall of Famer, I don't know, Jim Thome even. Like, he's going to be right on par with someone like that because catchers just don't have that longevity. But Joe, I think, is one of the 10 or so best catchers of all time. Yes, it stinks that he got hurt. Yes, it stinks he had to play first base. Yes, it stinks that it happened after he signed that big extension. But at the end of the day, Hall of Fame player, Hall of Fame person, and I'm absolutely going to love watching that speech in Cooperstown this summer.
There needs to be more Bowers in the Major League Baseball right now, period. Just a class act all the way. Absolutely. So I want to jump ahead to and then back because I can't think straight. But right now, how are you feeling about the team?
They're deep. I think that's the thing they have going for them most is they have 3 MVP candidates if we're honest. Correa, Buxton, Royce Lewis could all feasibly be in that conversation. And that's actually funny because the AL Central, every team has at least one player like that. Even the White Sox with Luis Robert, like, he's that caliber of player. So the Twins have multiple of that, which not many teams in that division can say. And guys like probably Jose Miranda, Trevor Larnach are going to be on the outside looking in for roster spots. And these are guys who have done some things in the big leagues. They're not accomplished, but Jose Miranda's second half 2 years ago, he really looked like he was going to be a player. And then last year it started slow, got hurt, and just kind of fell apart. But they'll have guys who are big league caliber hitters, pitchers, both starters and relievers in St. Paul, which is less than 10 miles away. They're going to be well equipped to weather the storms that come with a 162 game season. And above all, that's more than can be said for the other 4 teams in the division. So I'm feeling very, very enthused about their chances. And also keep in mind, Byron Buxton did not play center field last year. He missed a large swath of the season at the end. Carlos Correa was very clearly compromised by a bad wheel. And Royce Lewis didn't start the season with the team because he was rehabbing a torn ACL. If you have any chance of getting all those guys for the bulk of the season, it's going to be a no contest.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's 3 guys, and I don't know, in the outfield. Let's just look at the outfield position. One thing I always love to look at prospects. I've just love going to minor league games when I can. And so that's always astounds me, even if like the name doesn't, jump out in recognition. I always dig deep in there. But one thing I found that they have 3, which is so unusual. I don't know if there's any other team, 3 top 100 prospects that are outfielders. They have 4 that are in the top 100 prospect list, but 3 of the 4 are outfielders. And that's got to be exciting, as a Twins fan to know that that's coming up, and whether that gives, Byron a little bit extra, push, whatever. But knowing that they're coming, that's awesome. And then of course, Brooks Lee is the shortstop. That's probably the highest on the radar as well. But any thoughts on those guys, or anyone that you're most looking forward to in particular? Or?
Well, I think everybody's excited about Jenkins for good reason. And I talked to a few people in the game who said that Jenkins could have been a 1-1, number 1 overall in a different year. And when I would hear that from one person, I would pose it to the next and they would agree. And then I would pose it to the next. I probably went through 3, 4, 5 people who were like, yeah, this is a 1-1 talent. And the Twins already have a few of those. Buxton, Correa, and Lewis all went 1-1 or 1-2. So, in fact, I thought it'd be funny if they signed Mike Zunino, then they'd have 1, 2, and 3 from that 2012 draft. Now he retired and my dream is over. But anyway, as far as those outfielders, I mean, we don't know that much about Gabriel Gonzalez yet, just because he came over in the trade. But I think that while people are kind of getting focused on, Anthony DeSclafani, who's got some big league experience and, is coming off a tough year, and Justin Topa, who's a pretty good reliever, Gonzalez is the get in that trade. He's going to be the one that most provides, bang for the buck if this trade turns out to be a positive one. But with that said, and with Jenkins being just a global wonderkin superstar that everybody loves, I like Emmanuel Rodriguez. I'm going to zig, and not zig a lot when everyone else zags or vice versa, but what I like is it's a profile with a lot of plate discipline. And for me, plate discipline is a lot harder to teach than it is to break. And what I mean by that is some guys are so devoted to their discipline that they don't swing enough. The Twins had a guy like that in Aaron Hicks, who they had, he came about 10 years ago. And you can see the physical tools are there. You just need the guy to swing more. Their vision of the strike zone is so good that sometimes it makes them passive at the plate. The Twins have a guy like that in Edouard Julien in the big leagues, who is also very, very good at seeing the zone. But with Rodriguez, I like the tools. I like the skill set. He's on the 40, so he's going to be the kind of prospect where if they really got to dip down for an outfielder, it's always easier to take the guy on the 40, even if he's only in high A or double A, wherever he's going to find himself to start this season. But they did that with Jorge Polanco too. Back in like 2014, they dipped down when they needed an infielder, and he had barely played above high A, I think. So he's someone to watch this year because, again, while we all kind of understand that the outfield is in pretty good shape, especially after the Margot trade, the Twins had a season not that long ago where they were running like their 6th, 7th, and 8th options out there in the outfield. And it was a season they expected to do some things. So you can't help but be over-prepared, especially when you go through a season where everything goes wrong like it did in, I think it was 2021 that they had all those injuries in the outfield.
I'd like to ask a couple of questions at the macro level, not the micro level. And that is, for example, Target Field. Now, I have yet to be there. I try to go to as many ballparks as I can. It looks absolutely beautiful, but it looks like to me, do they have a sun field problem? There are certain times of the year, man, that outfield looks like the sun is bright as all heck out there. That's gotta be tough. Like
Yeah,
I lived in Central California. I'd go to Oakland A's games. That was a horrible sun field.
I think did Mount Davis help with that or hurt that? Or I mean, I don't even know.
I don't know.
It's something to think about. Anyway, yeah, I think it comes in over the third base side,
Okay.
if I'm not mistaken. But I know that there are times where the sun will be right over you in the third base side, and you'll be just baking. And beyond that, yeah, the glare for outfielders. You don't see. The funny thing is, they left the Metrodome, which is where outfielders couldn't see anything, and now
Right.
Target Field, they don't have a lot of mix-ups with that. But at the same time, too, I mean, they're big leaguers, so they should be capable of it. There's a lot of sunglasses. There's a lot of eye black. There's a lot of shading the eyes, which, that separates the men from the boys among outfielders when you have to catch a ball coming out of the sun. But it can get warm, but you have to be prepared. If you come for a night game, even in the middle of the summer, when the wind starts swirling up top in the 300 level or whatever they call it, it gets pretty chilly. So
Gotcha.
it's kind of funny how all that works because Minnesota weather is so tricky.
Because like I know with the Mets at Citi Field, they have a real issue with the sun. When the sun's going down, there are buildings that are on right field, and for about a half an inning to an inning, the sun is just bouncing off of the windows, and it's a tough thing for the batter. And you don't need. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, that's something that teams and fields have to contend with. I remember the Angels back in like the late 90s, the twilight would get all screwy, and then Darren Erstad, who is from North Dakota, so I watched him growing up. He would have
very
trouble.
Nice ball player to watch too.
Yeah, a tremendous player and tremendous athlete. He's a punter at Nebraska. But he would have trouble at kind of like that twilight period when the game was starting, judging the ball in center. So it's all these things you have to take into account for when you place your stadium and where you place your stadium. And sometimes Mother Nature just
I don't care what you say.
Flips you the bird and says, you know what, deal with it.
Yep.
Yes.
It's interesting you mentioned the Angels, and that's go down too far down this rabbit hole, but the late, great Ron Luciano was an umpire in the late 70s and the 80s. And he used to talk about, and he said this actually happened. He was calling a twilight game on Monday Night Baseball back then, and Nolan Ryan was pitching. And this was his actual call. Ball sounded low. He couldn't see it. He said, but go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh no, just one. There was one game at the end of a season. I don't remember if it was 93 or 94, but the umpire said it was two teams that were out of it. I think Houston was one of them. And he said, I'm going to call this strike zone as it's written. And they got out of there in like 2 hours and 12 minutes. And I think it was like Jeff Bagwell or someone. He said, yeah, it was a lot of fun. You knew what you were getting into, but it was literally the letters to the caps and the kneecaps, and they knew what to expect. And I guess it was a lot of fun. So, game can be funny like that.
Oh, it's fun.
That's
one last memory lane thing before I go forward is, I've loved this game my whole life. And and maybe I'm wrong because in Minnesota, maybe they give it the right praise that they should. But that team in the 60s that played the Dodgers in World Series was a good team. That was a real good team. And I don't think, did they get enough love in Minnesota? I mean, that was a really good team.
Yeah, I think there's probably not enough understanding of like the buzzsaw they ran into with Koufax and the Dodgers, and just how the workload that Koufax took on to allow him to pitch as much as he did, but for only a little time as he did. And also too, I think, the franchise was still pretty new in Minnesota when that happened. So I don't know I know they were good fans, but I don't know how engaged they were yet. It was hockey for the longest time. And the Vikings came over when the Twins did around that same time. So it was still kind of new as far as like now. Tony Oliva's a mainstay around the ballpark. So that's a nice, he's
love that man.
Right. He's an ambassador for the team. He's an ambassador for the game. And then a lot of the guys just aren't still with us. Zoilo Versailles died almost 30 years ago. And so as insofar as they can give respect to those years, they do. And Harmon Killebrew also, before he passed away, was a huge voice in the organization. And his big thing is, very short story, was he'd go to spring training and he'd watch guys sign autographs and say, these kids want your autograph. They want to read your name. Make sure you sign it so people can read it. And that was his thing, was someone comes to get your autograph, you better give them a good reason.
Small things are big things.
Yep.
Right. That's beautiful. I love hearing that story. And you mentioned, and then I'm going to shut up, Michael.
No, it's all good. I get it.
Did you hear what happened in Minnesota today? You're talking hockey. You hear what happened today with the Wild?
I heard people saying that the game took years off their life, but I don't know why.
Are you ready? You sitting down? Yes,
I'm ready.
I can see him. Right? They went 3-on-3 against Nashville in overtime. Minnesota pulls the goalie 3-on-3 and scores to win the game.
The overtime for the longest time as Wild fans was such a feeling of dread, because they were always the guys who were not as skilled. Like Zach Parisi's not skilled, but he goes into a corner, he comes up with the puck.
Yep.
They did not have the guys who could dangle or snipe or whatever they call it these days. And so like it was just always a dreaded feeling when you're facing like Chicago, who's got Kane or Taves or one of those guys who's everywhere. But now, it's a little more fun with Kirill Kaprizov and a few of these other guys. So we don't fear overtime as much as we used to.
And you were wearing the throwback North Star uniforms, which were really nice too. So I like that.
I'm conflicted on that, because it's not the shared history, but at the end of the day, when you can wear the Kelly green and gold, you got to do it. I have a hat back here somewhere of it, but it's I love those colors either way.
Yeah. Oh, no doubt. All right, Michael. Sorry, back to the future.
That's okay. So tell those listening maybe that haven't been, like ourselves, that haven't been to Target Field, in terms of their food. I mean, I like to eat. Darren knows I like to eat. And you mentioned Tony, and he's got the Cuban sandwich there named after him. They have the red cow burgers. They have the official fried chicken, and if I'm pronouncing it right, the Kamarchuk's Polish sausage. Those are the ones that stood out to me. But if you're going and you only get one day there, you can't stay a whole series, and you got to hit up a few stands. Anything outside of that, or are those the must-dos?
Well, and Pizza Luce is there too, but you can go to Pizza Luce outside the stadium, so don't waste your time with it there. It's good, but just don't waste your time with it. They had the boomstick when Nelson Cruz was around, and it was like a 30-inch hot dog, and he ate. Buddy and I had the boomstick challenge at the beginning of the 2020 season, and boy, I had the meat sweats for the rest of the opener, which was fine because it was like 30 degrees that day, so it worked out really nicely.
Yeah.
How big was the bun? Was it like?
Is it right on? Exactly.
Oh, right on there. Okay, that's awesome.
They took away, or they closed the stand that was my favorite, and it was Butcher and the Boar, and they had rib tips. Ooh. And then they would slather them with this like house barbecue sauce, and then the rib house pickles, the ones that are a little more vinegary. Now the Tony O is pretty hard to pass up. For the longest time when I would go, I'd eat in the press dining, so we would have whatever the cooks cooked up, which was pretty good. But honestly, just a plain, like the burgers in the press box dining room upstairs, the kind of snack cart, I still think about those, even though I haven't covered a game in a little while. It might just want to sneak in there and grab one of those, because they're like $3-4, and it's amazing. I don't know. It's a ballpark burger or a hot dog. What more can you ask for? But they do have some fun stuff. There is some, I think they have like an Indian food, like cuisine stand with like a naan and all that stuff. So honestly, I try something different every time, and they change it up often enough that I don't get too many repeat experiences.
I love hearing that, because it's so true when you're in the press box. And again, not throwing out nonsense, but with the San Jose Sharks, I covered them a couple times, a couple of years, and it's whatever the service free, I'm eating.
Yep.
Yeah. So one thing I like to do too on this podcast, a lot of times we like to talk about just fun stadium facts that maybe you might know, but maybe others watching may not know. So I jotted down a couple things I want to share. Sure. So they are the smallest stadium in all of baseball, but one thing that's interesting is they have over, I think it's like 15,800 or so of those seats are infield seats. So you're actually, even though it's the smallest stadium, you're actually closer to the field of play than most stadiums would be, which is pretty interesting.
And that's why they couldn't have a roof, is because the area was too small. It was actually just a parking lot before.
Yeah.
You would have had no idea they fit a park in there if you had somebody told you 15, 20 years ago.
Yep. And then here's another fun one. It said the turf was grown in Colorado, shipped in 19 refrigerated trucks, and installed within 24 hours of being cut. That's just wow.
That's like shipping it overnight air. I mean, you just can't be any faster than that. It's such a beautiful surface, though. Larry DeVito and his guys take such great care of that grass. And in Minnesota, it's hard. It really is.
It is. I think they said it was something, if I remember, it was like during the winter, I think they heat it to like 40 degrees. I think it is something like that.
And they do a lot of like recycling of rainwater to keep the grass green. It's actually a pretty cool system.
Nice.
That's awesome. Yeah. And then the last thing I jotted down, which is cool. It says along the 5th Street side of Target Field, there are knot holes which allow fans to watch the ball game from outside the park without getting a ticket. Not sure the visual, but it sounds cool. Something I would
probably check out. If I'm not mistaken, you said the 5th Street side. That would be, I think, the left field corner. So yeah, you can definitely hear too, like obviously the acoustics and everything play out there, and it's actually really fun to be walking downtown while a game's going on. Less fun than being there, but the sound is great.
I would love that.
Yep.
So I have a couple of questions, if I may. And it's just elitism, in my opinion, on the East Coast, West Coast.
Sure.
The Central is considered, it's easy. It's not that easy. I mean, the Mets found that out in 2015 when they got their butt kicked by Kansas City. You got the Cubs winning. Minnesota is always there. Do you guys take it personal? Because I know I would. That you don't get as much love on MLB Network, or you just don't care.
Minnesota doesn't take it personally. We get our feelings hurt, but we also kind of accept it. Minnesota fans are so fatalistic that, I don't know, we have chips on our shoulder, but we always assume it's our fault, not the people who are saying these things. We're just very self-deprecating.
Yep.
Just kind of this is just the way it's going to be. And when you mix that with the fact that sports are a failure endeavor, it can be toxic at times because, 29 teams don't win the World Series every year. That doesn't mean you didn't have a great season, for 4 or 5, 6 of those teams, but nobody wants to hear that if you don't win the World Series. It's like, I get it, but you can still have a great season. You can enjoy the ride even if the destination sucks.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
I want to get to Tom Kelly's teams in a minute, which I just, in my opinion, don't get nearly enough.
I have a fun Tom Kelly story. My old podcast, every guest that we had either a cell phone or computer access to Zoom, except Tom Kelly, who only had a landline. So we had to find him
in the kitchen, yellow phone in the kitchen.
Literally, this is 2 years ago. Not when we had to call him on a landline on Skype, which is hard to do because on Skype, it's, the interface is weird. And then it says something picks up and it goes, "This person is on a do not call list. If you are a telecommunicator or whatever, you have to hang up right now. If you wish to continue this call, press and then some number." And I'm panicking because I can't find the dial pad on Skype. And I'm thinking I'm going to fumble this chance to interview a 2-time World Series champion. And I was panicking.
I don't blame you.
I've talked to him before. I knew who he was. We've talked to Twins games, but I was still panicking because this was a big get for our show. And so, landline. We talked to Tom Kelly on a landline. It was quite a day.
You know what? Let's start with that. Those teams, they really caught the imagination, I think, of the country at the right time. And Kirby Puckett is, one of the greatest players I have seen in my lifetime play. Tony Gwynn, Kirby Puckett. I mean, unfortunately, both men are no longer with us. Talk a little bit about, we mentioned Tony Oliva earlier, how Kirby Puckett just took over the country and he died way too young.
Yeah, that 87 team is quite an enigma. Negative run differential, absolutely dreadful on the road, and they didn't win a playoff game away from the Metrodome either. In that entire playoff set, if I recall correctly, they beat Detroit without losing at home, and they beat obviously St. Louis. But as far as that team being Enigma, it just goes to show when you can catch fire at the right time. And a team like that, a non-coastal team, back then, playing an ugly stadium, nobody really expects much of you. What was 86? I don't remember if they're in last place or, back then, seventh place was different than now. They don't even have a seventh place. But I know they were bad in 86, and then 87, they win it all. And Andy McPhail famously said, "We were only trying to get our act together and we won it all," because it was his first year as GM, as full-time GM. But Kirby was the backbone of those teams. I mean, Tom Bernansky was maybe the heart and soul, or Gary Gaetti, and everybody loved Kent Herbeck because he was from Minnesota and very, very
hometown boy.
Yep, and very, very good. Like, if not for Don Mattingly, probably would have won a whole bucket load of Gold Glove awards and all that. But with Kirby, it was different because he came here and then he chose to stay here. Now, that didn't come until later in his career, but he hit free agency, I know, at least once, and I think twice, with the chance of leaving. And like Philadelphia was courting him, and Boston, although Boston would have been kind of strange because I guess he didn't have a really good time playing in Boston with the fans. But he stayed here and he lived here in the off season. He made his home in Brooklyn Park for a while, and Bloomington and Edina. Like, he was engaged in the city, and Minnesotans don't take that lightly. There were a lot of things during his career that we saw as positives. He was a great player, seemed to be a great guy. We found out after his career there were some skeletons in his closet, and so
everybody has, unfortunately.
It's a complicated legacy, but on the field, you'd be pretty hard pressed if you wouldn't. If you did a Mount Rushmore of Twins hitters, he would be on it every single time. So his importance can't be overstated. I think that his Hall of Fame induction might have been quick, because you look back at his numbers, you're like, well, didn't have 3,000 hits. The batting average was good, but he didn't take many walks. He was just a star who almost transcended the game based on his name and his look and everything.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, he was a Hall of Famer, and he was Minnesota's own. They claimed him, and he claimed them. And
that's the piece, the reciprocity, that they claimed each other. It was a moment in time. And sometimes you can't figure that stuff out. It's like
Justin Morneau's the same way. He lives here still.
Point.
Yep, he lives here still. He does broadcasting. He has a hobby farm west of town, and sometimes guys just stay. It's weird. Scott Leyes stayed. He's from New York. Kevin Tapani stayed. He's from someplace else, I think Omaha or something. But when guys stay, we notice. We definitely notice.
Yes, and one thing the last thing I wanted to bring up on my end today, we had talked a little bit earlier about the AL Central, and even though those 24 games are no longer, I think they subtracted 24 games from division play for the interleague play. So, I mean, it's not like it was, but so they didn't get the love there. But also when we talk about rivalries, like we have, Yankees, Red Sox, you have the Cardinals and Cubs and everything, like Mets and Braves and stuff. But it feels like to me, like the one that's least talked about, but is just as much, is the Twins White Sox rivalry. Can you talk a little bit about that? I think they call it the black and blue division. Is that right?
Well, they also say that about the NFL for the NFC North too. So and it's true, because I mean, that matchup, literally the colors that teams wear are black and blue, and it couldn't be a better metaphor. It's not been as intense the last few years. The White Sox have been just such a weird team to watch. They went from on top of the world with all these young players and prospects to now on a race to the bottom with the A's. And so, but I mean, things that ignited it recently, Josh Donaldson hit a homer and then was kicking some dirt on the plate. And I think that was in 2020 because there were no fans in the stadium. But the Torrey Hunter running over Jamie Burke back in 2004, 5, 6, something like that. Like, that was the epitome of this rivalry, was neck and neck, and Ozzie Guillen saying the little piranhas, the guys who at the bottom of the order just sting you and sting you and sting you to death, or I guess piranhas bite, but you understand the metaphor. It was a healthy rivalry. It never got too like nasty or anything like that, but there was definitely I think it was the 2008. Yeah, it was 2008 game 163, 8 or 7. I can't remember now, but that was a 1-0 White Sox win over the Twins in game 163. Like, every time the Twins were somewhere, the White Sox weren't far away, and they would have to beat them to get past that spot. And so it was fun watching it kind of volley back and forth before the Tigers got good again, and the Royals, once the Twins got bad, the Royals had all those prospects come through. But yeah, it's a fun rivalry. It's not, I wouldn't put it on par with like Vikings Packers, and I know Packers and Bears would consider that a bigger rivalry too, but I wouldn't put it on like a crazy level. But it's definitely series that you like watch a little closer, because they also try to do it with the Brewers, and like the natural rivalry just isn't there after the Brewers left and moved to the NL 20 years ago or whatever it was. But yeah, so it's a good rivalry, and you do miss some of those games that they took off the slate, because 19 times, 10 in their place and 9 in yours, or vice versa. 16 or 17 of those would be absolute dogfights. You'd have a blowout on each end, but even if your team was lousy and their team was great, you would still be a 5-3, well pitched, well defense, or a couple homers. Like, you would get the best from both sides in those games, and it's a fun rivalry, and I hope it ignites again. But for right now, it looks like it's kind of dormant, because the White Sox, man, they're just so bad. They're just so bad.
Yeah, they really. Yeah. And do you have? Just want to ask this too, and I'll share my quick experience first, and then maybe what in person.
He's freezing up, folks.
Freezing up. In
Good.
person. Okay. In person. Is there a game that stands out to you more than any other game? For whatever reason, I'll share mine real quick. Yes. Not even a major league game. I went to a minor league game down here. The stadium that's closest to me was called Space Coast Stadium, and at the time, we had the Brevard County Manatees, which was the single A affiliate for the Milwaukee Brewers, and then came the Nationals. And went to this game just looking to have a good time. It was like dollar night or something. 17 errors by the third inning. The scoreboard. A ball, yes, but there was a play so bad that there was the runner was going to second base, catcher steps up, throws to second base, throws a fly ball that the center fielder catches in his glove. I don't know what happened there. And then the next two at bats, fly balls to second base that the fielder didn't even get glove on ball. I could not stop like laughing. I would pay any amount of money to see a video of this game. I think it wound up with 19 total errors, but 17 by the third inning. So I don't know if anything could top that experience. So go ahead with yours real quick. And Darren, if you have one you want to share. And then
they tightened it up down the stretch, though, I guess.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yes, right.
2 errors down the last 6 innings.
Yeah, last 6 innings.
Yeah, you know what? I've covered only one playoff game in my life, and it was in 2019. Twins got swept by the Yankees, and that's not it. You'd think it was, and I set that trap deliberately. Joe Mauer's last game. I was so delighted to be there, and I still get, you probably can't see it, but I still get goosebumps, easy for me to say, when I remember him being announced as catching the 9th inning. And so he comes out, they had pre-discussed it with Yoan Moncada not to swing. Matt Belisle delivers a pitch outside or inside. I think it was outside. Mauer catches it. He walks off the field, hugs all these guys, and that's kind of it. That game to me, because he had a double in his last at bat, classic Joe Mauer left field double, hustled it out, made it just in the nick of time. Then he got to catch that one last pitch. And I think as long as I live, no matter how many games I go to, it's going to be pretty hard to top that, other than, game 7 or game whatever, World Series championship. But maybe probably surpass that. But I think Joe Mauer's last game is the top of the top for me. Although I will say this, and if you get a chance to go back and watch it, you should. The Twins played the Yankees in a game in, I think it was 19, where it went back and forth and ended up being like 12-10. Best individual game I've ever been to in my life. Aaron Hicks' diving catch ended it. The Yankees won, but it was like Aaron Hicks' revenge game, and it was awesome. I would highly recommend trying to find that one. Summer 2019, I think it was, but incredible game.
I think you're right. And I might be misspoke. Wasn't it also a Yankees Twin game where it might have been what kind of eventually got to the instant replay? Wasn't there a game where there was a ball that was called foul or something that was about 10 feet from? Yeah, you can see you turning red.
We're not okay with this. No, Phil Cuzzy calling a Joe Mauer ball foul that was fair. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I mean, it wasn't even close. Like,
and it
yeah.
landed, like 8 feet in or whatever. I think Melky Cabrera was trying to play it, and I think that was Melky. I'm not positive, but yeah,
Yes,
we
it was.
still do not have much love for Phil Cuzzy.
No, should you?
No,
No, should you?
let me tell you, the proverbial monkey off their back winning that playoff game against the Blue Jays, the first one. I could hear the roar from my house, and I live 25 miles from Target Field. Not literally, but the
No, I
roar,
got you. Yep.
just deafening, just awesome.
You know, there are so many reasons, and I'm not trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. I've been a lifelong Met fan. I've always admired the Twins. One, because they were the Senators at one point. I just love what they did. If not for, Sandy Koufax, they would have won that World Series. And they still almost did. I mean, they played really well. And then when they were really not very good, Ron Gardenhire made that team presentable. I mean, that team, did well. And, Mike, you asked about going to games. I remember I talked about this on one of our previous podcasts when I went to, I believe it was 1981. I went to the All-Star game in Montreal, and I went to the Dave Winfield Foundation, and I won tickets, and they took a whole bunch of us kids up there. And I bring that up because though Rod Carew was with the Angels, the buzz was that he was a forever Twin. So if you could just talk a little bit about, I mean, this is a man, 328 batting average, I mean, he played longer with the Twins than he did the Angels. And unfortunately, some people look at him as an Angel. He's a Twin.
Yeah, no question about it. And I think he would have wound up staying for much longer if not for ownership. There was a clash between him and Calvin Griffith, and old Cal had some principles that wouldn't stand up today in modern society. And but it's hard to go against where a guy started. Mm-hmm. Certainly, we don't think of David Ortiz, the Hall of Famer, as a Twin because it wasn't very long, and because those memories.
That's a great point. That's a great point.
Those memories are too painful. But it's like Johan Santana when he got traded to the Mets. He never played in a playoff game after leaving Minnesota. I bet not many people know that, And so it can be really hard, though, to shake the first team you're with. With Nolan Ryan, where do you think of him from, et cetera, like that?
Right.
You know what I mean? So it can be hard to shake that first team.
A great example of that is Tom Seaver. He gets his 300th victory, not with the Mets, but with the White Sox. He gets his no-hitter with the Reds, not the Mets, but you'll always think of him as the Met.
Yes.
That's a great example. A great point, Brandon. A great point. Because, I mean, I've always been a Rod Carew guy, just class all day.
Somebody said to him, I don't remember, somebody asked him, what do you think you'd hit if you were in today's game? And he goes, about 280. And someone said, what do you mean 280? You hit what you did in your career. And he goes, well, I'm 63 years old right now, or whatever. Right. Whatever. I don't know how old he was at the time, but that's how the story goes. It's like, well,
no, I'm sure he would have. I mean, and especially when they allowed the shift, you would not have shifted against Rod Carew.
No, I mean, he and Ichiro were shift proof, and Joe Mauer, the shift you'd put on would be opposite. Like, he hit the ball so hard the other way that if you were going to take it away, I'm sure he would have figured out a way to combat that too. But the shift wasn't that big when he was done, or at least not as big as it got. But yeah, it's incredible the skill, or like a Tony Gwynn. Those two guys are kind of synonymous for me for modern era pure hitters, whatever pure hitter means to any given person.
I got a weird last question for the both of you, and then Michael, send us whatever you want to do, send us home. But this is something I really would nibble on. You mentioned it earlier, and there's legitimacy to it, Brandon, the WAR stat. But to me, WAR is like QBR in football. Like, it wasn't around forever, and then all of a sudden, here it is. Mm-hmm. And, wins above replacement, and it's kind of, to me, could be a bit nebulous. I mean, you just know a good player based upon some of these other stats. Like, for example, with the QBR, because I played college football and it's sort of my background, Sean Salisbury, former Minnesota Vikings starting quarterback. He is the president of our PSF app, and I've talked to him a couple of times. You used to almost throw deep in third down because you're going to punt anyway in fourth, and there's interception. So what? Now it hurts your QBR. You know, I mean, it's just
Yeah.
different. You know, with WAR. So, what do you think about the new stats and whatever and things like that?
Well, and it's funny, and the game changes. I mean, you talk about quarterbacks in 1995. If you threw 27 touchdowns and 23 picks, that was a nice year. Now, if you
Yeah.
throw 23 picks, you're one way out of this, out of the league.
Yep.
I use it as a tool. There were times where I was way more into the idea of WAR, but like I like it as a concept.
Yep.
But at the same time, like there's so many marginal things. Like if let's say you're worth 0.5 WAR one day and 0.7 the next day, but you lose one of those games, whatever. Like the margins to me, it's not going to be like one win to one win to one win. You can't add them together and try to do anything meaningful because there's error bars and that sort of thing. And that's all I think fairly commonly accepted. But you do things that are in the small margins that even just a little tweak of a win above replacement or loss, those marginal things I think go bigger than what that win above replacement was worth. With that said, I'm a big proponent, not component of the measure and the idea. But the fact that we have multiple versions of it, there's Fangraphs, there's Baseball Reference, there's wins above replacement player, which started with Baseball Prospectus. There was win shares for the longest time with Bill James. There's a lot of different ways to look at it. You kind of just in one ear and out the other. You can't take them as gospel, but it helps paint a picture. And
that's what I look at it as. Exactly right. You can use it. It's a tool in the toolbox, but it shouldn't be the main tool or the only tool.
Yep.
For me, if it's, I'm just gonna be transparent. If it's not like because I'm a spreadsheet guy, if that column doesn't fit on my screen view and I have to scroll the bar over, I'm glancing at it, but I'm not taking it serious. That's just
that's a great way to look at it.
Yep. Well, thank you so much, Brandon. This was an absolute pleasure. Really enjoyed this. We could keep going, but to stop it at some point. So thank you so much, Darren, as well.
Brandon, real quick, and I don't want to stop leaving here, Mike, but before I forget, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, follow you, give us some lyrics. How can they do that?
I probably wouldn't, honestly. And when I introduce our podcast, I tell people they can unfollow me. But at Brandon,
I like this guy.
Yeah, right. At Brandon _WARNE on the tweets, and then Locked On Twins is the pod with Dave Brown, who was a national baseball reporter until the end of last season. Great dude. And we make a lot of fun observations, but between Twitter and that, and then Access Twins on Substack is the newsletter that he and I kind of share. So a lot of different places. Google me. I'm not hard to find.
Outstanding. Yes. Well, please do all those things. And thank you again, guys. And until next time, we'll see you around the ballpark.